The stars in the vast galaxy shone brightly as the battle raged on. It was a war between two powerful forces, the Xantheran and the Zorvak. The Xantheran, a proud and honorable species, were fighting to protect their home from the brutal and relentless Zorvak. Among the warriors was Commander Lyra, known for her incredible strength, leadership, and unshakable resolve. She fought side by side with her mate, Karak, who was not just her partner in battle but her everything. The bond between them was deep, stronger than anything Lyra had ever known. The battle had been going on for days. The sound of blasters, explosions, and the roar of alien creatures filled the air. The Xantheran had been pushed back several times, but they refused to give up. Their pride and their people's future depended on the outcome of this war. Lyra and Karak fought fiercely, their movements coordinated as though they were one being. They had been through countless battles together, always managing to survive, but this time, something felt different. The Zorvak had pushed them into a corner, and their numbers were overwhelming. Lyra's mind was sharp, but her heart was heavy. She could feel the weight of the fight bearing down on her. Karak, her partner, was by her side, but even his usual calm and determination seemed to waver. The two had always been in sync, but today there was something off. It was as if the universe itself was telling them that this battle might be their last, but they couldn't afford to think about that. They had a mission to complete, and they would see it through, no matter the cost. Karak glanced at Lyra, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. There was a silent understanding between them. He knew how she was feeling, uncertain, anxious, but there was no time to talk. The battle was far from over, and they had enemies to defeat. Suddenly, the sound of a Zorvak warship overhead filled the air. It was massive, and it released a barrage of missiles that scattered across the battlefield, exploding with terrifying force. Lyra and Karak dove into the nearest trench to avoid the blast, the shockwaves rattling their bones. "We need to take that ship down," Lyra shouted over the chaos, her voice barely audible above the deafening sounds of combat. Karak nodded in agreement. They had no choice. The Zorvak ship was too powerful, and it was wreaking havoc on the Xantheran defenses. The two warriors charged forward, using their advanced combat skills and technology to take down enemy soldiers and machines as they moved. Every step was calculated, and every strike was precise. Lyra's heart was pounding in her chest, and yet despite the overwhelming danger, there was a calmness that washed over her. This was what she had been trained for. They reached a clearing just as the Zorvak ship hovered low above them, its weapons aimed directly at the Xantheran forces. Karak looked to Lyra, his eyes narrowing as he pulled out a powerful explosive device, a weapon they had been saving for the right moment. It was a risk, but it was their only chance. "I'll distract them," Karak said, his voice steady. "You get close and plant the charge." Lyra hesitated for only a second. She didn't want to let him go alone, but she knew this was their best shot. "Be careful," she whispered. Karak nodded and turned to face the ship. Lyra could see the determination in his eyes. He was ready. As he advanced, Lyra took a deep breath and sprinted toward the ship's exposed underbelly. The Zorvak soldiers, distracted by Karak's approach, didn't notice her until it was too late. She planted the charge, but just as she was about to retreat, a Zorvak soldier saw her. Without hesitation, Lyra engaged the enemy, using her strength and agility to disable the soldier before retreating back toward the trench. She could hear Karak's voice in her earpiece, telling her to get to safety. The charge was set, and it was about to go off. Just as Lyra reached the trench, a powerful explosion rocked the ground beneath her feet. The blast from the Zorvak ship's destruction sent shockwaves through the battlefield, and the skies lit up with the fiery glow of victory. The Xantheran forces, empowered by the destruction of the enemy ship, surged forward, pushing the Zorvak back. But amidst the chaos, Lyra felt something she couldn't ignore. A cold, unsettling feeling crept over her. She turned toward the explosion, searching for Karak, but he was nowhere to be seen. Her heart skipped a beat. She scanned the battlefield frantically, her eyes darting from one fallen warrior to the next. Then she saw it, Karak. He was lying motionless near the wreckage of the Zorvak ship, his body twisted unnaturally. Lyra's world seemed to come to a standstill. Time slowed, and everything around her faded into a blur. She rushed to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she checked for signs of life. But there was nothing. The life that had once burned so brightly in Karak's eyes was gone. She could feel her own heart breaking as she cradled his lifeless body in her arms. "No," she whispered, her voice choking on the word. "No, no, no." The battle around her raged on, but Lyra could barely hear it. She felt as though the universe itself had ripped her apart. Karak was gone. The man who had been her partner, her mate, her everything, was gone. The bond they shared, stronger than any force, had been severed in an instant. She had lost him, and nothing in the universe could fill the void that now existed within her. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled her from her grief. A few of the Xantharan soldiers had found her, but Lyra didn't care. She was numb. She didn't want to speak to them. She didn't want to hear their condolences. All she could feel was the crushing weight of loss. "Commander," one of the soldiers said, his voice gentle. "We need to move out. The battle is won. We've lost many, but we need you to lead us. Karak would have wanted you to lead us." Lyra's eyes blurred with tears. She stood up slowly, her legs shaky beneath her. She didn't want to move. She didn't want to fight anymore. But deep down, she knew that this was not the end. She had a responsibility to her people, to Karak, and to herself. She had to keep going. But as she turned to face her soldiers, she felt the faintest sensation, an almost imperceptible pull, like a whisper on the wind. It was strange and yet comforting. Lyra paused, a part of her wondering if she was losing her mind. She looked down at the soulstone around her neck, a small, glowing gem that had once belonged to Karak. The light it emitted was faint, but it seemed to grow brighter as though it were responding to her grief. There was something there, Karak's presence, his essence. It was not gone. It was close. Lyra stood motionless, gazing down at the small, glowing soulstone that hung from her neck. The faint light it emitted seemed to flicker in sync with her heartbeat, like a distant echo of Karak's spirit. It was hard to explain, but in that moment she felt an undeniable pull, as if Karak was still with her. He wasn't gone completely, his essence lingered. But how could that be? She had seen him fall. She had held him in her arms, and he had breathed no more. "Commander," the voice of one of the soldiers broke through her thoughts. "The battlefield is clear. We've won. We need to move." Lyra didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the soulstone, the tiny light dancing in the dark. She could feel Karak's presence so strongly now. It was as if his soulstone was calling her, urging her to go somewhere. But where and why? "Commander," the soldier repeated, his voice now edged with concern. "The others, they need you." With great effort, Lyra tore her gaze away from the soulstone and looked up at the soldier. His face was weary, but there was a hint of hope in his eyes. He was waiting for her to give the order, to tell him what to do next. But Lyra had no words. She had no strength left in her to lead. For a moment, she felt lost. She had always been the leader, the one who guided her people, who made the tough decisions. But now, with Karak's death still fresh in her heart, she felt like a shell of the person she used to be. The warrior, the commander, the mate, the soldier didn't seem to notice her internal struggle. He stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Karak wouldn't want you to give up, Commander," he said quietly. "He believed in you, we all do." That was when Lyra felt it again, Karak's presence more strongly than ever. The soulstone flickered brightly, and in that moment she could have sworn she heard his voice. Not in words, but in the depths of her mind. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't her grief playing tricks on her. No, it was real. Karak's soul was still there, reaching out to her. His voice wasn't loud or commanding. It was calm, like the steady hum of a faraway star. "Don't let them see you break. You are stronger than you know." The words filled her with a sense of calm, even though her heart was still broken. He was still with her, even in death, and he was guiding her even now. Lyra straightened up, her posture shifting from one of sorrow to one of resolve. The soldier's hand on her shoulder was still there, but now she was ready to move forward. She could feel Karak's presence like a guiding light, and though he was gone from this world, his spirit had not abandoned her. "I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice firm once again. "Lead the way." The soldier nodded, a sense of relief crossing his face. He had seen the devastation in her eyes when she found Karak, and it had made him wonder if she would be able to continue. But now he saw something different in her, a fire that hadn't been there moments before. Lyra followed the soldier as they made their way through the war-torn battlefield. The landscape was littered with debris and the bodies of both Xantharan and Zorvok warriors. The air smelled of smoke and burnt metal, and the ground beneath their feet trembled from the aftershocks of the explosion. It was a graveyard of destruction, but amidst the chaos, there was a flicker of hope. The Xantharan had won, and they had driven the Zorvok back, at least for now. They reached the command center, where the remaining warriors and high-ranking officials had gathered to assess the situation. The air inside was thick with tension, but it quickly shifted as Lyra entered the room. All eyes turned toward her, and for a moment there was silence. Her presence commanded attention. She had always been a leader, someone who inspired confidence in others, and though her heart still ached, that part of her remained unchanged. She could feel Karok's strength beside her in her bones, urging her forward. She took a deep breath and walked to the front of the room where the others were waiting. "We've won," she said, her voice steady. "The Zorvak have been pushed back, but the war is far from over. We must continue to fight. We must stay united." The officers in the room nodded in agreement, and for the first time since Karok's death, Lyra felt a sense of control returning to her. She was no longer just a grieving mate. She was Commander Lyra, and her people needed her. As the meeting went on, Lyra found herself distracted again by the faint pull she felt toward the edge of the command center. It was subtle at first, like a tug in the back of her mind. She dismissed it, focusing on the task at hand. The war was not over, and there was no time to indulge in strange feelings or distractions. But the pull grew stronger with each passing moment. It was as if something, or someone, was calling her. After the meeting, Lyra excused herself, unable to shake the feeling that she needed to go somewhere. She knew she had to follow the pull, even though she had no idea what it meant. Karok's presence seemed to grow stronger with every step, like an invisible thread leading her through the winding halls of the command center. Eventually, she found herself standing before a large door, one that led to an unused section of the base. It was a place that hadn't been explored in years. The door creaked open as she pushed it, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor. Lyra stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the silence. At the end of the hall, there was a small room. The walls were lined with shelves, each holding various artifacts and relics from past wars. But in the center of the room was a pedestal, and on that pedestal lay a single object, a soulstone glowing softly. It was identical to the one she wore around her neck. But this one was larger, more radiant. As Lyra approached it, she could feel Karok's presence more strongly than ever. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling as she touched the stone. The moment her fingers made contact with it, the soulstone flared brightly, and a rush of energy surged through her body. Her mind was filled with images of Karok, his smile, his voice, his touch. It was as if he was standing beside her, alive once again. She could feel him, hear him, see him. "You're not alone, Lyra," his voice whispered in her ear. "I'm always with you." Tears filled her eyes as she clutched the soulstone to her chest. It was as if the universe itself was giving her a sign. Karok's spirit was not gone. He had never truly left her. His soulstone had the power to connect them, even across the vast distance between life and death. Lyra stood there for what felt like an eternity, absorbing the energy that flowed through her. It was more than just the power of the stone. It was the love and strength Karok had always given her. With him still guiding her, she knew she could carry on. She would fight for him, for her people, and for everything they had lost. Finally, she placed the soulstone back on the pedestal, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She was ready. Karok had shown her the way, and now she knew what she had to do. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. The days that followed were a blur for Lyra. The war had not ceased, and her duties as commander called for her every moment. Yet in the depths of her soul, there was a strange comfort, a quiet whisper of Karok's presence. His soulstone still pulsed softly against her chest, a reminder that he was not truly gone, but still with her in spirit. Lyra moved through the days with a sense of calm she hadn't felt before. Her soldiers noticed the change in her, the way she carried herself with renewed purpose. Her steps were more confident, her decisions sharper. It was as if the grief that had once consumed her had been replaced with a quiet determination. Karok's presence guided her, and though he could no longer stand by her side in the physical realm, his spirit was her anchor. One evening, after the battle had ended for the day and the last of the Zorvak forces had retreated, Lyra sat alone in her quarters. She had learned to appreciate these moments of silence, the rare stillness where she could reflect and feel Karok's presence without the distractions of war. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet wash over her. "You've come a long way, Lyra," Karok's voice echoed softly in her mind, as though he were right there beside her. His tone was warm, comforting, just as it had always been. Lyra smiled faintly, though there was a tinge of sadness in her eyes. "I wish you were here," she whispered to the empty room. I'm always with you, Karok replied. His voice was steady, full of love and strength. You know that, you're not alone, you never were. She held the soul stone in her hand, feeling its warmth spread through her fingers. The energy it contained was a constant reminder of the bond they had shared, a bond that no enemy, no battle, no time could break. As the days passed, Lyra's bond with Karok grew stronger, and she began to understand the true power of the soul stone. It wasn't just a relic, it was a link to his spirit, a way for him to remain by her side, guiding her decisions, offering her strength when she felt weak. It was a comfort to her in ways she had never imagined. But the war continued, and there was no time for rest. Lyra found herself at the forefront of the battle again, leading her soldiers into one dangerous skirmish after another. The Zorvok forces were relentless, and they seemed to have no end to their numbers. Each battle seemed to bring more challenges, more loss, but Lyra kept pushing forward, unwilling to let her people falter. One day, as she stood at the edge of the battlefield, overseeing the movement of her forces, Lyra felt something different, a shift in the air. A sensation that wasn't quite physical, but more like a change in the atmosphere. She glanced around, sensing that something was wrong. It was too quiet. Suddenly, a burst of energy cracked the sky, and a massive explosion shook the ground. The Zorvok had launched an attack, one unlike any they had attempted before. A strange, unfamiliar weapon appeared in the sky, a dark, swirling force that seemed to distort the air around it. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she realized the magnitude of the threat. "Commander," one of the soldiers shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "We need to retreat. That weapon will destroy everything." But Lyra didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the sky, on the dark cloud that swirled above them, growing larger with each passing second. The Zorvok were using a new kind of technology, something beyond anything they had seen before. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a weapon of annihilation. In that moment, Lyra knew they didn't have much time. The Zorvok had found a way to break their defenses, to turn the tide of the war in their favor. But she wasn't going to let that happen, not while she still had the strength to fight. She turned to her soldiers, her voice calm but full of authority. "We're not retreating. We're going to fight. We have to stop that weapon." There was a moment of hesitation among the soldiers. They were scared, and rightly so. But Lyra's presence, her unwavering determination, steadied them. She had always led them with strength, and now they were willing to follow her to the ends of the galaxy. As they rallied together, Lyra could feel Karok's presence again, stronger than ever. His spirit was with her, urging her to act, to do what needed to be done. She could hear his voice not as a faint whisper, but as a strong and confident command. "You know what to do, Lyra," Karok's voice echoed in her mind. "You have the strength to win this. Lead them, lead us." She nodded, her resolve solidifying. They would not lose, not today. Not while she still had the will to fight. With her soldiers behind her, Lyra led the charge toward the Zorvok weapon. The air was thick with tension, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the Zorvok unleashed wave after wave of energy blasts. Lyra moved with the grace and precision of a seasoned warrior, her blade cutting through enemy lines as they pushed forward. The Zorvok forces fought back fiercely, but Lyra's people were determined. They were fighting not just for survival, but for everything they held dear. With each step, they closed the distance between them and the weapon. Lyra's mind was sharp. She could feel Karok's strength beside her, pushing her to move faster, to act without hesitation. Every time a Zorvok soldier stepped into her path, she moved with fluid precision, her blade finding its mark every time. Her soldiers followed her lead, their confidence growing with each victory. Finally, they reached the heart of the Zorvok weapon, a massive energy core that pulsed with dark energy. Lyra knew that if they didn't destroy it now, it would unleash its full power, wiping out everything in its path. Without wasting a moment, she ordered her soldiers to set explosives around the core. But just as they began their work, the ground trembled beneath them. A massive shockwave erupted from the core, throwing Lyra and her soldiers to the ground. She fought to regain her footing, her vision blurred from the blast, but her resolve remained strong. She could still feel Karok's presence guiding her. He was with her, urging her to keep going. "Don't stop, Lyra," his voice whispered in her mind. "Finish this. You have the strength to save them all." With renewed determination, Lyra got to her feet. Her soldiers were recovering too, and together they made their final push toward the core. The Zorvok were frantic now, realizing that their weapon was about to be destroyed. They attacked with everything they had, but it was too late. Lyra and her team planted the final charges, and with a deafening roar, the Zorvok weapon exploded in a burst of light and energy. The shockwave knocked them all back, but Lyra stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle was won. As the smoke cleared and the sound of explosions faded into the distance, Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. The war was far from over, but this victory had shifted the balance. The Zorvok had been dealt a heavy blow, and they would not recover easily. For a moment she allowed herself to take a deep breath. Her people were safe, for now, but she knew that the war was far from over. She had a long road ahead of her, but with Karok's spirit still guiding her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The battlefield was quiet once again, but Lyra was not alone. She could still feel Karok beside her, his presence a steady force in the chaos of the world around her. "We'll finish this together," she whispered, the weight of his words grounding her. "We will win." The days after the battle passed in a blur of activity. Lyra's mind never stopped moving. She had led her people through another victory, but the war was far from over. The Zorvok forces had suffered a significant blow, but they were not beaten. Their weapons were still deadly, their strategies still lethal. And Lyra knew that it was only a matter of time before they would come back stronger than ever. But despite the uncertainty that hung in the air, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was a quiet, steady feeling that grew in her heart. The soulstone around her neck had become a constant companion, pulsing gently, a reminder that Karok was with her, guiding her every step. His presence was like a beacon in the dark, a light that kept her grounded, no matter how chaotic the world around her became. She had always been strong. She had always been the leader, the one who held her people together. But now, with Karok's spirit at her side, she felt even stronger. She felt like she could face anything, no matter how overwhelming it seemed. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out at the vast expanse of the battlefield, Lyra was joined by Vela, the seasoned warrior who had become her closest confidant. Vela had been by her side since the early days of the war, and though she was older and more experienced, she had always respected Lyra's leadership. "You've come a long way, Commander," Vela said, her voice low but full of admiration. "I've seen you grow stronger with each passing day. Karok would be proud." Lyra turned to her, a faint smile on her lips. "I don't feel strong, not all the time. There are moments when it feels like I'm barely holding it all together." Vela nodded, her gaze softening. "That's because you're human. Even the strongest warriors have their moments of doubt, but it's how we rise from those moments that defines us." Lyra looked out at the horizon, her mind turning over the endless challenges that lay ahead. She had never wanted to be the leader. She had never sought power or glory, but now, in the midst of the war, she knew that she couldn't back down, not when so many depended on her. "I feel Karok's presence," Lyra said softly, her fingers gently brushing the soulstone at her neck. "It's like he's still with me, guiding me, but I wonder, is this truly the path he would have chosen? If he were still here, would he have fought the same way?" Vela placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch steady and comforting. "Karok's strength was in you, Lyra. It always has been. His spirit is still with you, not because he is holding your hand, but because you carry his strength within you. The choices you make, the path you choose, those are your own." Lyra nodded, grateful for the older woman's words. She had always respected Vela, but now more than ever she felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She had to lead not just for her people, but for Karok as well. She couldn't afford to falter. The war continued. The Zorvok were relentless, and every time it seemed like the Xantharan were gaining ground, the enemy would strike back with renewed force. But Lyra was unshaken. She made tough decisions, sometimes sending her soldiers into battles that seemed impossible. But she never wavered. Every victory, every loss, strengthened her resolve. Karok's presence was a constant reminder that she was never truly alone. One day, as Lyra and her forces prepared for yet another battle, a message came through from the High Command. The Zorvok had launched a full-scale invasion of a neighboring planet, one that was critical to the Xantharan's defense. If the Zorvok succeeded, they would have a foothold that could tip the balance of the war in their favor. Lyra didn't hesitate. She gathered her best warriors and set out immediately. The journey was long and the tension was palpable. They had fought many battles before, but this one felt different. This time, the stakes were higher than ever. When they arrived at the planet, the sight before them was grim. The Zorvok forces had already established a strong presence, and their advanced weaponry was wreaking havoc on the planet's surface. The people of the planet, mostly civilians, were trapped, unable to fight back against the overwhelming force. Lyra knew that the battle would be difficult, but she was ready. She felt Karok's strength coursing through her, urging her to fight with everything she had. She gathered her soldiers and made a plan, knowing that they had only one chance to stop the Zorvok and save the planet. As they advanced toward the enemy's stronghold, Lyra could feel the tension in the air. The Zorvok were waiting, their weapons trained on the approaching force. Lyra's soldiers moved with precision, each one knowing their role. It was a carefully coordinated attack, and they would need every ounce of strength and skill to succeed. The battle raged on for hours, the sounds of blasters and explosions filling the air. Lyra fought alongside her warriors, her blade cutting through enemy soldiers with unmatched skill. She could feel Karok's presence with her every step, guiding her, pushing her forward. His spirit was a constant, steady force, keeping her focused when fatigue threatened to take over. But as they reached the heart of the Zorvok stronghold, disaster struck. The Zorvok had prepared a trap, and Lyra's forces were caught in it. A massive explosion rocked the ground beneath them, throwing Lyra and her soldiers to the ground. The blast was so powerful that it knocked the air from her lungs, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. She forced herself to her feet, her body aching, her vision blurry. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not now. The Zorvok soldiers moved in, and Lyra could see the fear in her warriors' eyes. They were outnumbered, and the odds were stacked against them. But she would not let them fall, not while she still had the strength to fight. With Karok's spirit at her side, Lyra pushed forward, rallying her soldiers to stand firm. She fought with all the power she had left, her blade slicing through the air as she took down enemy after enemy. She could feel Karok's strength flowing through her, pushing her forward, urging her to never give up. And in that moment, something shifted. The tide of the battle began to turn. Her soldiers, inspired by her strength and determination, rallied around her. Together, they fought back, pushing the Zorvok forces back step by step. Hours passed, but eventually the Zorvok were forced to retreat. The battle was won. The planet was saved. As the dust settled and the sounds of battle faded, Lyra stood in the wreckage, her body battered and bruised, but her spirit unbroken. She had done it. They had done it. And she had led them through it all. Lyra looked down at the soul stone around her neck. It pulsed softly, a faint glow in the dim light. Karok's presence was still there, still with her. She could feel his pride, his love, his unwavering support. He had never left her. For a moment, Lyra allowed herself to close her eyes and breathe. She was still the commander. She was still the leader, and she would continue to fight for her people, for Karok, and for the future they had yet to build. The war was far from over, but Lyra knew one thing for sure. She would face whatever came next with Karok's spirit beside her, guiding her every step of the way.